Welcome to Real Wisdom, where we dive into the real stories of remarkable women. Today, I'm excited to sit down with Kelly James. Kelly's a writer who's not afraid to shake things up and rewrite her story. After more than 2 decades of freelance success, Kelly decided it was time for a change, so she traded in her home office for a corporate cubicle. And what came out of it? A really funny and honest memoir called The Book That Almost Got Me Fired. Kelly's story is a reminder that sometimes we need to tackle change head on and that a little humor can go a long way. So if you're ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired by a woman who's not afraid to embrace whatever life throws her way, stay tuned. And if you're curious to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Welcome, Kelly. I'm really glad to have you here with me today. I know this is going to be a really fun conversation because you have some interesting things going on in your life right now. I know that for many years you were a freelance writer, and I know that you did some ghostwriting and even published some fiction books.
Yes, yes,
But
back in the
this
day.
is a memoir, definitely something different. How hard or different was it for you to write for yourself and about yourself?
That's a good question. Actually, the books that I've authored under my own name, I'm not including ghostwritten titles in this category because those are for clients, the authors. But even my books like Six Figure Freelancing, Ready, Aim, Specialize, my book on ghostwriting, I did include a lot of first person experience in it because I think it's really helpful to say when I started out, I made $17,000 my first year, be very candid, especially when you're writing about being self-employed, because a lot of that it has to do with the mindset of being self-employed. But this is definitely the first time that I wrote a memoir where it was just, you're basically talking about yourself in the third person, which is kind of weird when you edit it and rewrite it. But I am somewhat of an oversharer in real life. So that part wasn't hard. It was probably more challenging for me was deciding what not to put in or what maybe didn't move the story forward. I think a common mistake that new writers make is they think you have to put everything in. And what I learned about writing memoir is it's about the story, but it's also about the container that you put the story in, and that container can only hold so much. So when you're writing a novel, every scene should do one of two things. Number one, it should drive the plot forward, and or it should provide characterization, tell you something about the characters, ideally both. So if there is a scene in your memoir that isn't doing one of those two things, hopefully both, it probably doesn't belong in there.
That makes sense because you couldn't include everything. So your new book is called The Book That Almost Got Me Fired: How I Barely Survived a Year in Corporate America. But before that, you had been your own boss and making your own schedule. What was it like waking up one day deciding, I'm going to go back to work for somebody?
Yeah, that I really did do this as a type of experiment. I was very candid about this in the book too, but I needed better health insurance. My health insurance was expensive and crappy. And I had the opportunity to go in-house at a company that was only 3.5 miles from where I lived. You cannot get a better commute than that, unless you're literally working in your living room, which I had been doing for 22 years. But honestly, one of the biggest challenges was it wasn't getting up. It wasn't getting up because I had kids at home. I still have kids at home. I'm used to getting up and, doing the things in the morning. But having to put on grown-up clothes and then leave my house and be gone for 8.5, 9 hours a day was the challenge, because when you work from home or when you're a stay-at-home parent, you are used to doing all the everyday things of life, going to the grocery store, picking up a prescription, doing, taking your kids to school, going to the gym, getting groceries, whatever. You fit them into the rest of your day. When you're at an office and your physical body is in this location and you cannot leave, you have to figure out when to do all those other things. That was a little bit of a culture shock for me. And quite frankly, having to sit all day in one location was terrible because I'm a little bit of a hyper person. I get up a lot, take my dog around the block 3 or 4 times a day. I do laundry during the day. I might go outside and weed my garden for a while, but I incorporate a lot of movement into my day, and that's not really so acceptable in a corporate setting, or at least it wasn't 6 years ago.
How did you try to move around when you were in the office, or did you learn that it wasn't really appreciated?
They're not there. So I get up, but I try to get up on the hour. I don't wear a Fitbit anymore, but I did for a long time. And, or an Apple Watch will say, hey, you've been sitting, time to get up. But I did try to get up every hour. But ideally, I would go outside. You can't do that. You can't leave. I mean, if you leave your desk every hour, they're going to think something's wrong with you. But when I went to the restroom or if I went to get coffee, I did take a very long circuitous route to come back. And sometimes I would go, there was only like a 2 or 3 story building, but I would go walk the stairs for a couple minutes just to do something and get up and again, just not be sitting the whole time. And I think one of the challenges of having a desk job, whether you're in an office or you're working from home, is you are sitting a lot. And the clue that you need to get up and move is you've gone to social media or you're wasting time because you're trying to give your brain a break. That's a sign that you need to actually get up and move around, my opinion. But it's much more rejuvenating to take a break away from your computer and doing the opposite, which is, sitting and staring at the screen, get up, move around. I'm not going to tell people they have to do air squats or push-ups or anything, but it does help to actually move your body a little bit.
A lot of the book was about the lessons that you had learned, and I loved it. I thought it was so entertaining. What are some of the lessons that you hope women reading it will take away from it?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I was on a TV show last week talking about some of the do's and don'ts, and these were learned by making mistakes. Essentially, honestly, I think a huge one that when you're starting out, I think there is a natural tendency when you have a certain amount of experience in the work world and in your life to you have a lot of ideas, you have a lot of suggestions, you have a lot of ways that this could be done better. Let's not bring those like the first week or two, because I did do that a little bit. I was like, hey, I got a great idea. Yeah, you haven't even been here 2 weeks, but I can tell you're doing this wrong. So that's a big one. Like when you start a job, try to not try to be receptive, listen, take in, get in, let all the information kind of wash over you and you can take notes and decide what to do. Maybe don't offer your opinions yet. Number two, and I think this is hugely important, especially now when our world is so disconnected, get to know people's names. Like I had a seating chart of our whole office and I kept it at my desk. And when I met someone getting coffee or in the restroom or whatever, I would come back and I would write notes on my seating chart so I knew who was who, because otherwise I couldn't keep people straight. And people don't walk around with name tags. So, and you can't really say I can't remember your name 3 or 4 times. It doesn't.
Yeah, right.
So, and I think the third thing, and I did talk about this, one of the biggest indicators of how successful and how content you're going to be at work is your relationship with your boss. Figure out what your boss wants, what he or she needs, how he or she likes to be interacted with, what that person's pet peeves are, and manage that relationship. And that was definitely something I could have done better at the beginning. I got better at doing it as time went on, but I think that's something that people overlook that is really important.
I don't want to give too much away, but I know that in the book, it's not always easy dealing with your boss. And I think especially when you're coming from being your own boss and then you're in this environment where you have to really connect with these people, and you made some references about not wanting to cry.
True.
And I think that that was just so real, because I know when I'm faced with a new challenge or a new environment, I think it's just that feeling that you don't know where all of this energy is going to go. And surely you couldn't have taken it out on the boss, but you have that feeling that, oh, I'm going to get emotional.
Well, and I think this is true with a lot of women, not all, but sometimes people say about men, every emotion gets expressed as anger. Like, if, they're scared, oh, they're angry. They're afraid, they're angry. They're stressed out, they're angry, whatever. I think with women, when we are having a strong emotion, I might be frustrated, I might be angry, I might be upset, but I may cry because that's my response to those emotions. And there's nothing worse, or there are few things worse, than being in a professional setting as a woman who wants to be taken seriously and crying, because it does not I'm not saying there isn't always a place for it. Sometimes there is, but you definitely do not feel in control, and you don't, it's one thing when you're crying, and you're aware that you are, you know what I mean? Like I cry easily. I cry when I'm happy. I cry at some commercials, you know what I mean? But that crying when you are angry or frustrated and can't get control of your emotions is demoralizing, and it feels very, what's the word I want? You do not feel empowered when you are crying out of frustration. That's how I'll say it is not empowering at all.
And especially when you're trying to, get your feet on the ground. If there were a career path for crying, I am a professional
You were on
crier.
it?
I will cry at
Yeah.
a moment's notice. Sad commercial, sad song,
Yes.
happy dog. It doesn't matter.
Happy
Um,
things too, like if you ever really need to cry, just go on YouTube and do like soldiers coming home surprise videos, and I will just weep because sometimes you do need that outlet, and I'm like, and it's happy, it's that, oh my God, this is so, like, so there's nothing wrong with that. But that's controlled crying. That's, I'm home, I feel emotional, I need to get some tears out. We're going to do it intentionally. So,
yes. I think for a lot of reasons, your book is entertaining, it is also inspiring, because there's a lot of women, and you were working, but you were making a career change. And I think there's a lot of women that in their midlife, they've either stepped away from the corporate world, or they've had children, they've had reasons where they weren't working. And it's hard going back in at a certain age. What did you feel, like, with all the changes in technology and the different ways that people communicated? Was that harder for you than you thought it was going to be?
I definitely had concerns about learning new tech. And I hate to admit that because I'm a Gen Xer, and, their perception is I'm not going to be as agile, or I can't learn this tech as fast as, a digital native like my kids and, people in their 20s. And that really wasn't the case. I truly believe that if you are an intelligent person who's willing to say, okay, I don't know how to do this, and learn, I think anyone can learn anything. I mean, I don't want to try to do brain surgery on somebody, but I overestimated how challenging that would be. And I may have sold my various qualifications. Like I may have said that I had worked with Excel quite a bit when I had only used Excel twice to create 2 invoices. So I was like, oh yeah, I use Excel all day. And then I was like, why does this keep turning into math? Like I had no idea. That's what Google is for. So, and I would Google, and I would also go over and ask like one of the guys on the SEO team and say, hey, I'm trying to work with this spreadsheet, and here's what I've done, and I don't understand. Have you done this, or can you help me with it? And my way of asking a question is to say, here's what I've done so far. So I'm not just coming over and asking you to spoon feed me, but it's the same thing when I was freelancing full time, and I would go to the reference librarian and I would say, I'm looking for this study that I need for an article I'm writing. I looked on this database, I looked in this database, I can't find it. Do you have a subscription to this particular journal? Instead of just, I don't know where to find this. And I think that when you have a question and you say, here's what I've done so far, and I still don't know the answer, people are more, first of all, they're more likely to be willing to help you, and they help you in a positive way. It's not, oh, for God's sake, she still doesn't know how to do this. And I really think, especially when you are, quote, one of the older people in the workforce, you can't think, oh my God, these people could be my kids or my grandkids. know, you have to take that out of your mind, because I don't want them thinking that about me. I don't want them thinking, oh, oh my God, this lady's older than my mom. You're trying to meet someplace where you're trying to have a relationship and share information, or hopefully help each other do your jobs better. So we all have bias, whether we are aware of it or not. We all have bias, and we all have prejudices that we are bringing with us. So being willing to say, okay, it's not even that this 25-year-old has nothing that he can't, that he can help me with. It's just, this guy's really smart, and I'm going to listen. And guess what? He's really into shoes, and my son is into shoes. So I was like, I love your kicks. My son, can I take a picture of your shoes? I'm going to send them to my son. Looking for ways to connect with somebody. And I really think that's hugely helpful as well.
That does make sense. Finding that point where they know that you're paying attention to them and not just coming and asking for
Right.
advice.
Right.
Yeah, that
Well,
you
I
see
mean, I
them.
want the answer. Don't get me wrong. I want the
Right.
answer. And I always like it when somebody makes an effort to get to know me or connect with me before they, extract the information they need from me. So I do understand that people appreciate that.
You had said that it was kind of a challenge because you were emailing people that were literally sitting 10 feet away from you. What did
Correct.
you think about that, or how did you sort of work around that?
I will say, just like if for example, when I'm working with a ghostwriting client, I will say the best way to get me is email, or excuse me, is phone or text. That's the best way to contact me because I don't look at my email all the time. I have personal email. I look at it in the morning and at the end of the day. If you need me, you can reach out to me. I prefer text to phone calls because if I'm on a call and you text me, that's fine. I can text you back and I might say I'm in the middle of something. Let me call you back. My personal dislike is people who want to jump on the phone. No, I don't want to jump on the phone. I'm busy. I don't want to feel like talking to you. But when you find out what somebody's preferred communication method is and you can use it, and again, many people do prefer email because you've got the timestamp on it. It's right on your computer. You can decide to reply to it. You can put it in a folder. So there are reasons for that. But I think the important part is knowing or learning how people want to be communicated with and then honoring that. And the other thing, and I was a lawyer in my former life, so if I had a conversation with somebody and we talked about a deadline or a project or here's who's doing what, you better believe I'm sending you an email to confirm what. And that might have been overkill for some people. They're probably like, I told her I'd do it. I don't care. That's called CYA, cover your ass. Done that. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe the person doesn't like getting those emails. I'm going to send you one anyway.
That's fair. And then it's there. There's a record of everything that's going
Yeah.
on because people do have selective memories.
Might be sending you the email for myself too, because if I've forgotten about it and I can go back and look at my sent messages, even at my current job, I have so many pieces of content going on at any time. I'm like, I know I talked to which neutral, what was it on? And I'll have to find it in my sent messages. I can't remember everything.
Um, so what are you working on? What are you passionate about? What would you like the audience to know about what you've got
Yeah.
going on?
What am I passionate about? Okay. I'm actually working on a novel that I set aside for the last few months while I was getting this book ready and promoting the book. I would like, within 5 years, I would like to be, if not retired fully or, moving in that direction. And my goal when I quit the law to write full time was to be a full time novelist. And I sold a novel for $7,500, and then I made some money on it in royalties. And then I sold my second novel for $7,500 and made a little money on it. Well, it takes me about a year to write a novel, so I can't live on $7,500. So
Yeah.
I shelved that idea. But eventually, I would love to be writing fiction full time and then doing articles and stuff as well. And one of the great things about getting older, it's not nothing. I thought I was going to say nothing. No, it's that you accumulate more experience and more wisdom and more knowledge and more stories. And I feel like I can be a better writer now because I've had more life experience than I could have been 20 or 30 years ago. So does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. With that, would you then encourage, do you have any advice for, women who think that they have a book in them?
That's so funny because I used to speak at a lot of writers conferences, and people would come up to me and say something like, I have a book in me dying to get out. And I'd be like, that sounds painful. No, I feel compelled to write. I get up at 3 in the morning and I can't stop writing. And I would be like, there's medication for that, but okay. Truly, my advice is pretty much the same, which is you just have to sit down and write it. When I was ghostwriting full time, the vast majority of people who came to me talking about wanting to write a book or wanting to have me write their book, they were not willing to put in the time and sometimes the money to see it through. I write every day. It might only be 10, 15, 20 minutes. It might be an hour, but I write every day. And that keeps my subconscious engaged. Like I'm always thinking about it in the back of my head. And I know that if I stop, I may stop for good. Like if I stop for a day, Then I'll write the next day, then I stop for 2 days. And I just know my own, I'm much better at doing something every single day than 5 days a week or 3 days a week or when I feel like it or whatever. So when somebody says, I want to write this book, what's your advice? I say, write every day. Well, I can't do that. I'm like, you can write a paragraph, you can write a couple sentences because my dad was a dentist and I'd be like, you brush your teeth every day, right? I hope. Well, yeah. Well, even if you set aside 10 minutes to work on something, you're keeping your subconscious engaged and how do I want to phrase this? You're telling yourself, you're showing yourself that this matters. You know what I mean? Like when my kids go out the door, love you, be careful, love you, see you later. Okay, love you too. I'm doing that automatically, but I'm doing it because it matters. It's just that little tiny reminder. So when I'm not yet ready to start working on this novel again, but I've been writing about working on the novel, and it's much more fun to talk about and write about the book you want to write instead of writing the book. I will tell you that. I'm like, oh, it's going to be so good. I'm going to write about this. I'm going to write about, and then I'm like, oh, and I have to actually write it.
Yeah, there's that part.
Yeah, yeah. But once I make that commitment, I will work on it every day until the draft is done. So I should say I get to work on it every day until the draft is done. So just make that commitment and show up for yourself. And it doesn't have to be writing. Somebody I used to be a personal trainer. If you want to, become more active, can you take a 5 or 10 minute walk every day? And so, well, that's nothing. I'm like, that's what I want you to do. I want you to do something so small that you can do it because you do build on that. And I saw some interesting research that said if you start something and you do it for 5 minutes, you will probably continue doing it. So it's just, that there's a psychological term, but it's that barrier to starting, you know what I mean? It's like a
Yeah.
wall. But once you've started, it's much easier to continue. So when I say I write every day, I'm not saying I'm a Stephen King who says he writes every day except Christmas and his birthday. And then he was like, actually, I write every day. I just thought that was funny. And I was like, well, I don't write every day, but I write every day when I'm working on my own book project. You know what I mean? So set small goal, a goal that seems so ridiculously easy, you can do it and build from that.
Okay, I'm going to throw something at you
Okay.
because I think you can handle it. You're a pull shark.
Trying to be aspiring.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my mom about this. My mom's visiting for a couple days, and I took her to pool with me on Sunday night. I have, in my 50s, have become a big believer in hobbies. And to me, a hobby is something that you do for the pleasure of doing it. You're not trying to monetize it. You might not even be trying to get better at it, although with pool, I am trying to get better at it. But I never had, or I shouldn't say never, but I had few activities that I did for their own value. If I was reading, I might be coming up with a new story idea, or if I was watching a movie, maybe I'm going to write something about it. But it always seemed like there was always some end game with the way I was spending my free time. And I started playing pool because I was looking for something to do when I had gotten divorced, and our kids were with their dad for 4 days out of every 2 weeks. And there's a pool hall a couple miles from my house, and I used to drive by, and I was like, I'm just going to go in there. And I played a little bit. And you're in a bar, you shoot pool, but I'd never learned how to play. Nobody showed me or anything. So I started going in there and playing, and ended up on a league, on a team. And I've been playing off and on for 6 years since then. So I prefer to win. It's very frustrating when you're going to win and lose maybe half the time, but if you play really well and you lose, that's just as good, almost as good as if you win but you didn't play so great. So it's kind of like golf in that there's so many different aspects to the game. You can always get better and you can always work on something. And one of the cool things about pool is the table is always different. So you're playing the table. The table, you might have a really great table, like you've got solids and you can run out, or you might have a horrible table. You just don't know. You just have to play it as it lies, literally.
So you got into it as basically a distraction,
A way to waste time.
a way to waste
Yeah.
time. Well, then that's good because it kind of leads me to my next question. There's a lot of women who get to midlife, and there's a lot of different changes coming at you. And I know that you faced a lot of changes, becoming a single parent and, teenagers and their hormones and getting back into the dating world. Was there a constant for you that kind of helped you get through those different things?
Wow. I thought you were going to say, was there something in my life that was a constant? I was going to say, yes, it's anxiety, and I still have it. Um, Honestly, I mean, it used to be when I was writing the book and probably in my 40s and until the last few years, it was working out hard. It's funny because I wrote the book 6 years ago, and when I'm reading it now, I realized how much I was over exercising because I would get up and I would go to the Y and I would run 4 hard miles on the treadmill almost every morning, and I was 52, and because I needed it for the stress release, you know what I mean? Or I would go and I would lift really heavy, or I would go to body pump or whatever. And over the last couple of years, I work out much less now, like maybe 20 to 30 minutes a day, which may be a lot to some people, but when you're talking about like hours a week, that it's what I consider minimal. But I meditate every day, and that has been a game changer for me. So I I still react to things, and I'm still emotional. I'm an emotional person, which I like about myself, but I don't overreact so much. And so instead of it being like, a giant sine curve of, oh my God, it's more like, oh, okay. I was on a call last week where this idea came up that pretty much sounded like, if we go this direction, I'm going to be out of a job. Okay. Often pretty
Okay.
stressful, right? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that wouldn't be ideal. And 2 years ago, I mean, I would have been freaking out, and I would have been calling my friends and writing my resume, and whether or not that happens, I have no control over. But that sense of none of this really matters, and we might be like kind of going off on a tangent here, but nothing really matters. I mean, I'm not, and so just staying, well, is this something I can control? No. Will worrying about it change it? No. Do I want to waste any time worrying about it? No. So let's move forward and focus on something I can control. I don't know that answered your question, but I'm just glad that you didn't read the list of all my physical imperfections, which I regret publishing now that the book's published. That'll be on my dating profile one day. I don't know.
No, we didn't need to bring that up. That's for sure.
Any
Um,
woman over 40 has her own list. That's what I'll say.
right? That's so true. Because for some women, certain things don't bother them. And
Right.
then for others, you can be very sensitive about, like bodies change. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of surprises that go along with that.
There's this thing called gravity. I don't care how good looking you are. I mean, go to an exercise class with 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds. That's the way you're going to go. I'm just telling you.
But also those exercise classes are, they're sometimes intimidating because you're going there for a positive reason, but then you're looking around the room and it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is going on.
Yeah. Holly, you can always find someone who looks better than you, and you can always find someone who looks worse. I'm just saying. So maybe, I don't know. It's like there's a wide range of body types out there. I know very few women who are every day like, oh my God, I'm fabulous and awesome and whatever. I think women in general tend to be more like, I'm a troll who lives under the bridge or whatever. But I think that we're in general way too hard on ourselves about everything,
Mhm.
but definitely two of my really close friends have actually gotten off of all social media. And one of my friends said, I'm so tired. Every time I would go on there, it would tell me all the things that were wrong with me and what I needed to fix and what I needed to improve and how I needed to look better and how I needed to lose weight. And as soon as she said that, I was like, that is all my social media. Like, but she has actually chosen not to be exposed to it all the time, which I really respect. Um, and it's challenging if you're watching it or looking at it all the time to not be impacted by it.
Right. And I think as moms, you want to stay in front of those things. I know we're talking about how it affects us in particular, but you also can't completely walk away from it because you have to know what's affecting your children also.
Well, you have to at least have a handle on it. I agree. And I have a son who's 19, and then I have a 14 and a half year old daughter. And I worry much more about her, although I think she has in fact, I know she has a very good, healthy self image and everything, but most things have been curated. A lot of it's been airbrushed. It's this unreal expectation. This isn't real life. And then my big thing is having my kids off their phones and just the importance of, a conversation like this, ideally in person. But, you came to that event on Saturday and my daughter and my niece were there and both of them are able, and they're both 14 and they're both able to have conversations with adults, which I think is a huge, I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, but I was traveling back from Atlanta a couple of weeks ago because I was down there for work. And when I used to fly, one of my favorite things to do was go and get a drink, like get a glass of wine at the airport bar and talk to all the people, like, oh, where are you going? Oh, you're flying to San Francisco. Why? And no one talks to anyone else. They all just sit there and they look at their phone. I'm like, you
Yeah.
can have a great conversation, but you're just going to look at your phone. I don't get it.
Speaking of children and writing books, did they support you when you said that you were going to write a memoir? You're going to write a book about yourself. Are they included in the book?
They
In
are.
some
They're
way?
actually, the book is dedicated to them. It's funny because when my son was born, even as he was growing up, I don't know how I started doing this, but I would never say, I love you so much, or, I love you to the moon and back, or I would always say, I love you a tiny bit. Because obviously as a parent, I'm being facetious, but I'm like,
Yes.
I love you a tiny bit, like the tiniest tiny bit. So it's dedicated to Ryan and Haley, who I love a tiny bit. And when my daughter was, I think it's actually in the book, but she must have been about 7 or 8. I was saying goodnight to her one night. And I said, good night, Haley. I love you a tiny bit. And she yells out, I love you less every day.
It's funny. And it's
Yeah.
just something now that you can joke about with her.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And I think, I don't know that they came to my book launch last week. And I don't know, I think Ryan understands it better. He's 19, but they've grown up. They know I'm a writer and they've seen me publish books, but once they read it, which Haley's not allowed to read it yet. Ryan could read it. He's 19. It's fine. I think they'll have maybe a better understanding of who I am. And then again, I'm their mom. I don't know that they want to read it. You know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
later. Maybe after I'm gone, they can read it and be scandalized. I don't know.
Well, just add it to the list. I'm sure that's the
Exactly.
way
To the therapy list. All the
yeah.
things we're going to need therapy over.
I'm sure there are things that I've done wrong and the kids are writing this down, but
Yeah.
okay. I always like when I get to the end of every episode, I like to invite our guests to tell me what is going on. Like, where can we find Kelly? Where can we pick up a copy of your book?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, I have a website, kellykjames.net, just like it sounds. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Same thing, Kelly K. James. I'm on Facebook, Kelly K. James again. As you said, it's the book that almost got me fired, How I Barely Survived a Year in Corporate America. At your local bookstore would be great. And it's also available on Amazon. It's a Kindle. They have an Audible edition. I'm a big fan of supporting local bookstores if you can. And otherwise, we'll just give more money to Amazon because I guess Amazon needs more money. I need more money.
This has been so much fun, and I'm really glad we got to know each other a little bit better. And thank you
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.